Hello, this is Raina Read Stuff. This is my first video. My name is Debs. I have a quick introduction. I am from the UK. I live in Nottingham in the East Midlands. I am married. I have 2 grown-up children. I am a new grandmother. I used to be a journalist. I was a journalist for 37 years and I took voluntary redundancy in middle of COVID, beginning of COVID-ish. It was about 2.5 years ago. Gives me plenty of time for reading and writing. I spend more time prevaricating about the writing and reading instead. This is my reading and writing hut. It's a summer house shed. I don't know whether it's going to be too echoey for these recordings, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I thought the best way to introduce myself would be to do a media freakout, because I've had reading goals since the beginning of the year anyway, and I found them, and it's the right time, and it might give you an idea of what sort of books you'll see on this channel. So, I've got my list. Oh, that doesn't show up there. That's better. I'm going to work my way through them. I am going to start at the top. Best books I've read so far this year. Right, there's 2. The first one is this, Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. Absolutely loved it. Hadn't heard of Hannah Kent before. If you've not read it, it is the story of an Icelandic woman who was found guilty of murder in 1829 and was condemned to death. They didn't have any prisons on Iceland, so they sent her to live on a remote farm until her death sentence could be carried out. Hannah Kent is actually an Australian author who spent about a year, I think, in Iceland and became fascinated with this woman's story. And it was beautiful. I loved it. Really gripping. Good page turner. The other one, Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. I'm ashamed to say I had never read any Colson Whitehead. I found this in a bookshop and liked the idea of it. It's about a young lad who gets, he's very intelligent. He's going off to do classes at college. He thumbs a lift with someone. Turns out that the vehicle's stolen, and even though he didn't know that, he gets sent to a reform school for boys. It's the story of him in this reform school and how hideous it was, and it's the inspiration for this was taken after bodies were exhumed in Florida, I believe, and on the site of an old reform school. It's quite harrowing, but it's so brilliantly written. I loved it. So those are my 2 best books so far this year. Best sequel so far, that one's easy too. Richard Osman's The Man Who Died Twice. Richard Osman, if you don't know, is a very funny television presenter and writer who moved into writing novels, and the first of his novels was The Thursday Murder Club, and it's set in an old people's home, and 4 friends, one of whom is a former spy, one is a former nurse, one's a real London geezer who has a famous boxer as a son, and the other one is a psychiatrist. And they have decided to get together to try and solve cold case murders. The spy is married to a man living with dementia. And another character in there is a guy called Bogdan, who appears to have a very checkered past, but is very good at being the muscle and the eyes and ears for these four sleuths. And I loved the first one, but The Man Who Died Twice is funnier. I've got the next one in paperback, and it's something about a bullet. I can't remember the title off the top of my head. But this, it's just so funny. There's a real crime with twists and turns. The cast of characters is just superb, and I love the way Richard Osman writes. So, that's my best sequel so far. New releases I haven't read, but I want to. Probably Yellowface. I don't really follow new releases that much. A lot of books I buy are picked up from second-hand stores or gifted to me. All these ones, the classics up here, they were gifted to me by an elderly lady. Yeah. Most anticipated second half release, I genuinely, I don't know. Biggest disappointment, that's quite easy. I found, when I was looking through BookTube, a Historian tag, and I thought that would give me a good excuse to read some of the many history books I've got, because I do like history. This, however, huge disappointment, enormous. It is about Ethelfled, the daughter of Alfred the Great. And to start with, that's how thick the book is, and I don't think she comes into it until at least halfway through. I mean, there's a vague mention once in a while, but nothing substantial, considering she was the warrior queen, and it is meant to be about her. The other thing wrong with this book was, I don't know whether I've got an unedited version, but there were so many mistakes in it, it was unbelievable. So we had half-finished sentences, we had sentences that didn't make sense. At one point, we jumped back in dates 100 years because the year was wrong. At another point, twice, we jumped forward 100 years, and we were talking about the end of the 10th century and not the 9th century, even though it was meant to be the 9th century. And yeah, it just wasn't very good. Which was a shame, because I did want to know more about her. Next question. Biggest surprise. The biggest surprise, and it wasn't its fault, it was entirely my fault. You see this book here? Rivers of London. Now, I picked this up in a second-hand shop, and I genuinely thought it was going to be about the hidden rivers of London. And it wasn't. I should have realised from the top here, I don't know if you can see it, it says, the Sunday Times best-selling Peter Grant series. In the heart of the... You see this bit? In the heart of a capital a different world hides. Still made me think about hidden rivers in London. That bit at the top should have given me a clue that it's actually fiction. And it's described as a cross between Harry Potter and CSI. It's about a newly qualified PC called Peter Grant, who finds he can talk to ghosts, and he is seconded to a very small population of one, until Peter joins, a department of the police that deals with crimes involving magic that really nobody knows exists. It's hilarious. I loved it. It was a surprise, but that's because I thought it was going to be about the hidden rivers of London. I have now got the next 5 books in the series. I think there's 8 or 9. And I'm very much looking forward to reading them, and they won't be as surprising. Favourite new to me author, we're going back to Colson Whitehead because I thought it was brilliant. I really want to read The Underground Railroad, which I've got, and Harlem Shuffle, I think I've got on my TBR list. Newest fictional crush, no, let's not be silly. I don't fall in love with fictional characters. Newest favourite character. I think Joyce, who is the rather dappy nurse in this, is probably one of my newest favourite characters. She's just hilarious. There's more to her than meets the eye. I am sure in the next books her character is going to develop more. She writes, some of these chapters are her writing in a diary, and she's just really funny. So yes, love Joyce. Next question. A book that made you cry. There's only been one this year, and it was this. Kirsten Hanna, The Four Winds, about the Great Depression and living in the Dust Bowl. It's a family saga, brilliantly written, absolutely loved it. Can't tell you why I cried because it will spoil it, but it was lovely. Where are we? Book that made me happy. This made me happy. This book made me happy, and I haven't read it for a very long time. I first read this book when I was a teenager, which was many moons ago. Josephine Tay's a Scottish author, and she wrote this. When did she write this? Possibly in the 1950s? 1951. It's part of a series she did featuring Inspector Alan Grant from Scotland Yard, who solves a variety of crimes. This, however, Inspector Grant has managed to fall down a hole. Actually, I think he fell through a ceiling. He's broken his leg, he's laid up in bed, he has nothing to do, and he needs entertaining. He's bored senseless. So a friend of his decides that while he's lying in bed doing nothing, he ought to use his detective skills to solve a cold crime. And they don't get much colder than this, to be fair. He thinks that he can tell by looking at someone whether they are criminally intent or not. And his friend decides to try it out. So she brings him a load of pictures from the National Gallery of people who are suspected of scandals of some sort, and he flicks through these pictures, and he is attracted by a photograph of a painting of Richard III. It's this one on the front cover, and he thinks, using his skills, that he can say that this person would not be a criminal. So he starts trying to research the history of Richard III to determine whether or not he killed his nephews, the princes in the Tower, which I was taught in history when I was at school that he did. He engages a friend of his friend who is an American young man who's doing some research at the British Library, and he engages him as his runner and researcher to try and find first-hand information about Richard III. And it's a good lesson in not believing everything you read and looking at the source and what angle the source was coming from. It is fiction, but it is also history, which I love, and it's just a brilliant book. And I hadn't read it for probably maybe 30 years, and so it made me very happy to find it and to read it again. Book to film adaptations that you saw this year. Don't tend to watch many films. I watch a lot of crime dramas, but not a lot of films. However, because it is Jane Austen July, I did watch Sense and Sensibility the other day, which isn't a new adaptation. It's from the 1990s. It starred Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet, and it was brilliant, and I loved it. Favourite review you've written, vlogged. I write regularly on WordPress, and it's also called Raina Reads Stuff. And I think probably the favourite review I've written this year was a review of this, which is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever read, and I quite enjoyed slating something, because I don't tend to read books that I don't like, but part of the challenge that I set myself was to read all 50 of these Penguin modern classics. You can see those here. This was number 8. It nearly put me off, to be honest, because it is just dreadful. I don't know if anyone likes Gertrude Stein, but this is about, well, it's called food. I like food. I thought it might be interesting. Now, some of these actually are meant to describe things, specific things. I'll give you a clue. This is a vegetable. Okay. Not a razor less, not a razor. Ridiculous pudding, read and relet put in, rest in slender, go in selecting, rest in white widening. Now, what does that mean? What vegetable is that? Would you know? Because it's called cucumber. It means nothing to me. This means nothing to me. This is a ridiculous book. So I enjoyed writing that review because life is too short for me to read books that I don't enjoy. And the only reason I read this was A, it's only 50 pages, like all the Penguin modern classics, and B, I can't read all of them and miss out number 8. So that's the only reason I read it. Normally the reviews I write are positive because, like I say, I don't read books that I don't like. So if I'm not enjoying it, I DNR it. But this one I did finish and it was awful. Right, most beautiful book I've bought or received. That's really difficult. I think the most beautiful books are probably hardbacks, and I read almost exclusively paperbacks. A, because I buy a lot of them second hand. B, because I treat my books very badly. I leave them open on the table. I stuff them in my handbag. I lose them. And then find them in ridiculous places. So I don't want to do that with hardbacks. And also I find it more comfortable. I find it easier to curl up with a paperback than I do a hardback's a bit. I've got this, which I use sometimes. This is actually an easel, tabletop easel. And that's quite good for putting books on. But again, I can't curl up on the sofa with that. What books do I want to read? Oh, that's noisy, sorry. What books do I want to read by the end of the year? Well, the book challenges that I set for myself at the beginning of this year was to read 200 books as of yesterday. Was yesterday the 1st of July? I think it was. As of yesterday, I have read 101.4. Now, the 0.4 isn't a book I'm halfway through. The 0.4 are these. I decided that because they average 50 pages, and that really isn't book size, is it? I would read 5 of them and count them as one book. So, as of yesterday, I had read 17, and that works out as 3.4 books. and then I had read another 98. Anyway, so the books I want to read, finish this lot off. I think I've read 18. Oh no, I read 19 by mistake. I've still got 18 to read because I read 19 by mistake. So I've got another 30 odd of those to read. I also wanted to read something, I like lists, so last year I listed all the authors that I'd read in alphabetical order of their surname, and at the end of the year I found there were 2 letters that didn't have any authors under them. So this year I want to fill in all the gaps. So far I've done quite well. I have read a book by an author from every letter of the alphabet, with the exception of U, X and Y, I think. But I've still got 6 months to go, so that's fine. I'd like to read some more non-fiction books. I'd like to read some more poetry. I like poetry very much. And I would like to read some more plays. I think that's it. So, what I plan for this BookTube channel, if I can get my words out, is some TBRs, some reviews. I like the idea of tags. I want to join in with Jane Austen July. I want to join in with several other tags. There's another one about the middle of the year, but I'll do a video about that later. I think probably I will eventually end up doing 1 or 2 pieces of content a week if I can, and we'll see how it goes. If you'd like to follow along with me, please press the subscribe button. I have a funny feeling that my husband will be forced to subscribe, but then won't read anything because he won't watch any of them because he's not interested. But I'd love to have some people subscribe and have a chat to more bookish people about bookish things. That would be lovely. So thank you for your time, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.